everybody, welcome to the latest episode of The Dog and Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and we have a heck of a guest today. Who is it? It's Mr. Geof Isherwood. Geoff is an artist, he's a painter, he's a sculptor, he's got so many wonderful things going on. I know him best from his run on Doctor Strange. He is my favorite Doctor Strange artist. He talks about that. He talks about the famous number 50 issue where it has Doctor Strange pointing up there and there's foil all around it. It's a really cool issue. I know some people don't like the foil covers. I think this one came out pretty well. Geoff has worked on a whole bunch of different other projects throughout the years. We talk about that as well. So sit back, enjoy Mr. Geof Isherwood with artist Geof Isherwood. Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. Absolutely.
So the first question we ask everybody is, how did you first discover comics?
Well, I was a kid and was reading a variety of things, more kids comics, I would say. The Casper and Richie Rich and Archie and these kind of things. But I also read comic strips quite a bit, and I liked Peanuts quite a bit, and a lot of the others, Wizard of Id and what have you. So this would have been in the 1960s. And then later on, in the end of the 60s, I saw some Marvel comics and kind of discovered Spider-Man first, and then, Fantastic Four for specifically. And those really caught my eye. So that would be it, yeah.
So how in life did you decide that a career in comics might be something that would fit you?
I was 10 when I decided. With that childhood mentality and simple thinking, Well, I like drawing and I'm going to try to be really good at it. And I like drawing people. I had an interest in anatomy and learning that. And also, I thought, well, what can I do as an artist, And then when I saw the comics, there's something, of course, the colorful Marvel, the primary colors and these comics and seeing the credits. And at the time, when you see the nicknames everybody had, like Jazzy Johnny Romita and, Jack the King Kirby and all this, it's like, yes, looks like a really fun bunch, This is the kind of thing I want to do. Plus, I also saw a picture of Charles Schultz's studio where he lived in Minnesota at his house. It was a big room, and he drew at home. And I thought, yeah, I don't even have to travel anywhere to go to work. I can stay home and do it. That's even better. So, in the mind of a 10-year-old, I decided then. So I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to work hard, learn how to draw better and better, and become a comic book artist someday. And I just decided that was it. It's like thousands of others.
So how did your big break come along?
Okay, well, of course, I was drawing my own comics and just kept working at drawing on my own, really. Of course, I took art in high school and what have you, but it was interesting. My high school art teacher, when I was 15, said, you should do some life model drawing, drawing from a life model. So I went to, it was in fact, as a church they were holding drawing sessions. So I went to a few of those and started drawing the real figure. And I found that was quite interesting as an activity that way, because when you go in to have, a model sitting there posing for you, it's an entirely different situation from what anybody might expect offhand, because you go in there and you start looking very, treat it very clinically. I always took it that way. It's like, what are the shapes? What am I seeing here? How does the figure put together? I treat it in a very technical, scientific way. So that's when I've been more recently, when I've been teaching classes the same, I always treat it that way too, because of course it's where you're dealing with nude models and what have you, people get really uncomfortable in those situations and whatever. So I kind of feel like it's when you go to the doctor's office and you yeah, okay, they have to deal with something that we don't usually deal with, but it's okay because they're doctors, like that kind of situation. So I kind of always treated it that way, and so it's worked out fine. But yeah, it was my original interest in figure drawing. So my Mr. Dodge, Gil Dodge was his name. He helped me that way. Then I, of course, went to a junior college. It was living in Montreal, so they would have 11 years of high school, 2 years junior college, 3 years university. That's how they divide it up, so you get to a college experience 1 year earlier. Anyway, and I've been working on my own comics and what have you. So it was one summer when we live in Montreal with the family. I grew up in Maryland, so you can see right here my was there recently, Tillman
Mhm.
Island. Yeah, anybody's familiar with might know of the place. Tillman is an ancestor in the family. In fact, curiously enough, Matthew Tillman wrote the Constitution of the state of Maryland way
Oh,
back when. So he's one of my ancestors. Anyway, so my mother's side of the family goes way back to settler days in Maryland. Anyway, so we would, it's where I grew up, and then we would go there for the summers and what have you. So on the way back to Montreal at the end of the summer, when I was 16, could we maybe drive into New York City and maybe I could stop at the Marvel comic book office? So yeah, let's do that. So of course, my younger brother and sister were there, my parents, and we had like four cats in the car and in the station wagon. So they came. We drove in through the Lincoln Tunnel and drove to Marble and on Park Avenue, and while they drove around the block, my father drove around the block a bunch of times, and he's from New York anyway, so he wasn't familiar with it. He was comfortable fine driving in there. So I went up there and get to the reception as hello, what can I do for you? I said, well, I have, I'm an artist. I have some samples. Oh, come with me, just walk in. And then so I was introduced to Dave Cockrum and Marie Severin, of all people. And of course, he'd already done the new X-Men, right? So I knew that. I had of course collected it. And so they were very great people, very helpful. Of course, I was nowhere near ready to work professionally, but they gave me some advice here and there. And, keep working, kid. And, looks pretty good so far. Just keep at it. So that was fun. So that kind of lit the fuse in another way, in that sense, like, oh, this is the real place. There's the bullpen. Look at that. It's kind of interesting. All the offices for the editors. So, and then so I think I was 18 when I sent some more work in. And so yearly I would, send in some more work, or I'd go to New York actually, and I'd go see who I could. And so it just was a process of doing that and working on some of my own comics, working on some independent projects as I gradually got better at drawing. It was it's just a long process, and it's just, I didn't have specific instruction really. For me, wasn't like the Joe Kuber School, or there were no college courses, that sort of thing. Um, I did go to university and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts, but fine arts and illustration are, it's drawing, but it's two different streams. So the other major thing that did happen though is when I was 18, was at a convention where John Buscema was a guest, and I found him, and I swear I must have been there about 2 hours. I stood there and just watched him drawing, watched him sketching in that gestural loose style he had to draw first. I'm doing right-handed because I'm left-handed, but he's right-handed.
mm.
Watch him draw in a gestural way. And to this day, anytime I started drawing, I come and pick up on how he worked, and I find that drawing from gesture to get the sense of life and acting is very important first. So that's always been my first step in a drawing, rather than trying to slowly, carefully draw something finished. So that learning from what he was doing along with anatomy books and what have you, that really helped. When I was at university, I implored my drawing teachers to help me with figure drawing, and they said, "You can draw better than us. We can't help you." So, yeah, thanks a lot. Where's somebody I can learn from? So, and it turned out, had to be within the industry. Later on, let's end this question there and then continue.
Well, I just want to touch briefly because you mentioned it in Montreal. You're putting out your own books. What was the independent comic scene like at that time?
Okay, so what I was doing is I was working with a few other people, primarily. Things sort of would get started and never get finished. Things like that. You do a few pages here and there, and it wouldn't happen. However, Mark Shainbloom, who was publishing he had a fanzine called Orion, and then he later on did Northgard as a comic, which I helped him create the character, and Gabriel Morissette was the one who wound up drawing it mostly, but I did some of that with him. And Roger Broughton was another fellow I did a few things with, but again, that didn't really, I guess he published a couple of things, but nothing was really, that well known, or that, nothing really came of that too much. But again, I was just working through the process of improving my drawing, so that it was when I was 21, I had just graduated with my BFA, and from Concordia University in Montreal, and I'd gone back down to New York and was able to get a short story for Bizarre Adventures, a Marvel magazine. It was a black and white story, so I penciled a 9-page story there. It's a horror type story, and Aiken and Garvey did inking and kind of tones on it. And so then that didn't lead to anything else. And I also went over to DC, and I would always go to DC and Marvel both, when I'd visit. And DC there had a comic called New Talent Showcase. Now this would have been 1982. So I did penciled a story, a Western horror type story. And then once I'd finished that, the editor at the time, I can't recall even who that was offhand, but said, "You want to ink the story too? You can ink it, But again, that was done. I got no other work. So this would have been like July, September of 82. And I had a part-time job working at a head office for a department store chain. So I was doing that. So I gave my girlfriend at the time, she was also into drawing and what have you. So she was able to take over that job from the at the department store, kind of as a, like, you do it, and then I'm going to go to New York, and this time I got to really stick it out. So this was the spring of 83, and I have had an aunt living in Uniondale, Long Island, so I could stay at her house. I didn't have to find somewhere else. So that was great. So I could take the Long Island Railroad in and out of the city. And so again, I started going around hitting up everybody I could. And so Marvel, some people showed interest. Yeah, but we don't have anything right now. DC was kind of the same. And then I thought, well, there's Red Circle Comics. Now, this is an offshoot of Archie, 40 years ago, right? So Rich Buckler was running this little outfit. So I went up to, where was it, like White Plains or something?
I think so.
And something like that, yeah. So I took the train up there, or subway if it went that far, I can't recall. But anyway, I went in there, and he says, "Hey, yeah, looks pretty good. Look, I'm drawing this thing called the Mighty Crusaders, and I got half penciled pages here. Can you, finish? I got layouts. Just help me finish the pencils on this thing." So, yeah, okay. So I figured, I can deal with this, So sure enough, drawing away some, superheroes on an aircraft carrier. That's kind of what I remember. And so I did that for 3 days with him. And then I got a call from Marvel, Ralph Macchio, said, "Hey Geoff, got a Daredevil fill-in. You want to try that?" Yes, I'll be right over. So I said, "Thanks very much, Rich. I got a call from our. Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, go do it. Go do it." So I went in, and that was the first Daredevil. And I tell you, like I had to sit down. Okay, we use this plot method of storytelling. It's not a full script. I go, okay. I think I knew about this already, but um, you got a synopsis, and then you got to figure out the panels. How much goes on each page. You have to portion it out, and then how to tell the story visually. And he says that the idea is that the artist should know better how to tell a story visually than a writer. So let's have the artist do all this. The writer doesn't have to figure out this panel, what camera angle, and that. They don't have to waste their time with that. Just tell you what happens, and you, the artist, are going to figure it out. Because if you're drawing comics, half the time you're just going to kind of read through the script and as I would do, and sometimes you could split one panel into two, and sometimes you could take two panels and combine them into one. And camera angles, I don't like this angle, I'm going to go with something else, it follows better, and all this. So ultimately the writer might wind up doing a lot of stuff that's unnecessarily they don't really have to so much. Well, in theory, that's if you're trained to draw comics this way. So anyway, that worked out really well. And Danny Bulanati inked the story, and he saved me in many places, which was great. And he just passed away this past year, I think, which is unfortunate. But I never got to meet him personally. But it was fun to have him work over. And then from there, I was offered Power Man and Iron Fist, and then another one, and then soon after, I think I did 3 issues of the Dazzler, and then things like Swords of the Swashbucklers. I went over to Epic, which is and Marvel. It's like another office, but did that and gradually worked into regular series. And I was, could be penciling something or inking something. Didn't really matter to me. Was all great, but getting that first job, it's like, this is Daredevil. I was shown Frank Miller, Klaus Janson pages, in the office, and like, this is the real thing. It's like you've been playing, double A, triple A baseball, and now you're in the major, you're at Yankee Stadium, and you're coming up to bat. It's like, this is the show, man. You can't just stand there and wave it, at a slider and look like a fool. You got to make some contact here. You got to make something happen, right? So I just put that this time of year. I can give you a baseball analogy. I could give you a hockey analogy, being in Canada, just the same thing. But
I say I'm a Mets fan, so baseball, unfortunately for me, is
Mets. Well, they didn't do too hot today, but what the hell? I'm an Orioles fan, so this year is so much fun.
Congratulations!
I don't even think they won 50 games a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden they've just packed the team with prospects. Look out!
Most definitely,
it's fun. It's fun.
As a young person, did you know that? Because it's something that we're learning as fans, that we always thought that the artist and the writer and maybe the inker were maybe in the same office together, bouncing ideas off each other. I was just sort of seeming we learned that that's really not the case. One thing gets passed to each other, and like you said, you never got to meet, some of the inkers that you worked with. Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah. Not really, because I knew most people work from home. Some people would have a studio. I just read recently that Al Williamson had a studio and had other artists come in to work as assistants because he just gets so lonely working on his own. He just wanted to have some camaraderie and social life around him at the time, which I can understand. But there was a place like Continuity, which I never went to. I had no business over there with Neil Adams in that and all of that. I had no real reason to go, you know, and I didn't really didn't know him, didn't know people going there. So, you know, that's one place I never went. So I would really just deal with people at the office. And yes, I would meet other artists while there, you know, Bob Camp or Dave Simons, the late Dave Simons now. Was there early on with Conan the King when Mark Silvestri was penciling it. I met him. And, you know, Michael Golden, a bunch of people, a lot of artists, you know, whoever was in. And then, of course, in the bullpen itself, I used to drop in and see Jack Abel and George Russos, for example, and some of the others that might happen to be around, Rick Parker. But yeah, people like that who were just there all the time. But yeah, what would happen in general later on would be like once or twice a year, I would go down because Montreal wasn't a big deal to go to New York. It was an easy flight, you know. But I would go down and might meet with the editor and a writer on a series I was doing, say Doctor Strange or Namor, that kind of thing. And we would kind of hash out, you know, what we might want to, what we're planning for the next 6 months, a year or something, and then go home and just work on stuff.
Talk about some of the books you work on because they're really wonderful books. But as an artist, was there a period of time where you felt that you had made the right decision, that you were confident in your abilities, and you said, you know, I made the right career choice and I belong in this industry?
Yeah, up until the late 90s. No, not really. Oh, no. You know, it's funny because there are various people I've talked to more recently, and I can preface that by saying now having been going to comic book conventions for the last dozen years or so, I've met a lot of artists more recently that, you know, I might have worked with back in the day or knew everybody's work then. People are my contemporaries. So I've gotten to know a lot of people more recently, but and here and there, some were saying they've had bad experiences here and there. And I had very few of those, probably because I wasn't at the office all the time. So I didn't see office politics. I didn't see, you know, these kind of things going on. I just saw who I had to see. Like even when I went to Marvel, like I never met John Romita Sr., even though he was there for a number of years when I was there in the beginning. But again, I had no business in his office.
Hmm.
So you know, I didn't just start to wander in and just say hello to anybody. You know, I'm here to see this person. That's who I go see. And I kind of, you know, walked by offices and got to know a few people, but I wasn't just sticking my nose into everybody's business. So, yeah. So in general, I have to say, no, it was a great experience. And to this day, of course, that's, you know, going to conventions. It's very good that I had the career there and um, you know, fans still bring comics that I drew regularly, and I still do a lot of commissions for people and all that. So it's all good, you know. I mean, even though I haven't worked for Marvel or DC for 25 years now, but the carryover from that era is still strong, and it's so yeah, I'm quite happy overall with that, and still grateful that I was able to get into the business when I did. Um, I don't even know what it's like these days. It must be really daunting, you know. It's just because I think it seems very difficult to get access to the people you should get access to that you would want to see.
Hmm.
And at the time, it was still like a big family business. You could walk in off the street and, you know, you could walk around and talk to everybody in person. I mean, it was much better. And now there's like a fortress feeling, I guess.
I think you're right. Let's talk a little bit Submariner, one of the legendary characters of all time. They put you on the book. What were your thoughts on the character, and what did you want to bring artistically to the book?
Okay, so that would have been Mike Rockwitz, who was editing at the time, and I had been drawing Doctor Strange, and it was Jay Lee, who was doing Namor, and he was leaving the book. And Mike said, "How would you like to? Could you like to switch over and draw Namor?" And I thought, "Yeah, okay." Hadn't really thought about it too much. I mean, to be honest, my first reason for going to Marvel is because I wanted to draw Conan the Barbarian. Okay, that's because Marvel had him. However, to back up to go forward a while, when it was even in the same office as Mike was Larry Hama's assistant for a while there. When Doctor Strange came available, when Butch Geist was leaving the title, and I had done some Tales of the Vishanti for a while also, right, in a couple of years before. The book came available, and I asked, "Can I draw, Doctor Strange?" And they said, "Yeah, okay." That was a quick answer. I like that. So that was one title. I mean, besides going after Conan and Larry Hama being the editor of the Barbarian books, and getting that was an interesting story even to get started with working with him. However, the Doctor Strange was one character I actually asked to do. Otherwise, it was like, you want to draw this, So Namor I hadn't really thought about much, but what I found was, what I liked about it is, what is his costume? He's wearing a bathing suit. And it's the guy, it's like the same as Conan. You're drawing the real figure. There's not a lot of costume, not a lot of stupid detail, all kinds of, well, Doctor Strange is very much like that. Draw a Doctor Strange, there's all kinds of little stuff you got to deal with. The cloak, you have to draw that little design on it, and how does the cowl really look? And it still always is, am I ever going to really get this into my mind, how this works? This kind of thing. It's like people complain about drawing Spider-Man. It's like, oh, to draw the webs, I always liked drawing the webs. It never phased me. But here's Namor, it's like he's the guy, and he just put wings on his ankles, which seemed kind of silly. So why? But the guy's just a big muscle man, and he has to. But to my mind, he also had to have somewhat the physique of a swimmer. Mm-hmm. So again, there's kind of this. He's not just bulky, but there's a sleek feel to it as well, because he can also fly. But the whole idea of superheroes is surreal to start with, so you just go with it. But it worked out, and Glenn Herdling was writing at the time, or he came on they hired him to write the book, and so he had a fun take on doing some stuff with revisiting the Fantastic Four, and then Namor gets tricked into siring a son with Lyra, the Lemurian. That was a nasty story. In fact, I even had a 2-page spread in issue 50 lifted from the comic. Really? It was too risque. And the book came out, and I'm going, what happened to my 2-page spread? And in the back, there were 2 pinups. And I called him. I said, the readers just lost 2 pages of story here. Like, what's going on? Well, we couldn't really show Namor was here in the bed, and there's Sue waking up in the bed, like we couldn't really show so explicitly what was going on last night. But I had a feeling it had passed through the editorial process right to the end. I don't think Rockwitz said no to it, but I think somebody higher up the food chain might have gone, we can't print this. So, or the Comics Code Authority got a hold of that story and says, well, was it too old late? You can't put that in a comic. So it wasn't the only time I tried something a little off base that was axed, but what the heck. But so the idea was certainly to make him this really super strong, and he's an angry guy too, right? He's a different type of character. He's not your average hero. And so to have that take on him, and Glenn had a really good feel for him, being, the protector of the oceans and all this kind of thing. And definitely at odds with the air breathers, the surface dwellers on a regular basis. That was a good take. And so And unfortunately, the comic wound up getting canceled in the end, even though sales were still quite good. I mean, but by today's standards, they were terrific. But it's too bad that one got shelved. But that's the way things were going in the mid '90s with Image starting up, I guess, and Marvel was trying to figure out what can we do to keep up with them.
Mm.
The era of the hollow foil stamped covers and all this, which I thought was like, what a gimmick. When is this going to run out?
Was
That's
it?
what we were dealing with.
I was going to say, I was going to bring that up in a second, but just to backtrack for a second, taking over for Jay Lee, who had a very
Yeah.
distinct style, it kind of, drew a lot of audiences. Was there pressure on you because that style was so distinctive and now you're coming in that fans might be like, well, what's going on here?
Well, perhaps, but yeah, I would say reading some of the comics he drew, I kept up the look he had with Namor. I wanted to keep that. He had that long ponytail thing and the gauntlet things like this. So that part I kept going, and but primarily, and this was interesting too because I took over a couple of book jobs from Butch Geis. Well, one was the Doctor Strange, and the other was Swords of the Swashbucklers, and I yanked him a few times too. So I liked the way he drew, so I kind of understood where he was coming from, maybe more so than Jay, but nevertheless, interesting. I've met Jay at a few conventions more recently, so we hit it off fine. He's does some he's still doing super fine work to this day. But the way my approach to drawing any job was really to look at the what had gone before, because I was never trying to reinvent the wheel with the character, but to say what worked when I was reading these comics, what worked for me. And there are always a number of artists' work that I would look at. For example, with Doctor Strange, there was Frank Brunner and Gene Colan, for example, and of course Paul Smith had drawn for a while, and and of course Ditko way originally. Naturally, it was his character, but I mean, and there are others, but those are the artists that I would. And when I would be working on a story, I'd kind of it's a little bit of feel of maybe this artist or that I kind of put in there because I can understand how readers can feel quite alienated when a whole new artist and something completely unfamiliar hits them. Some will love it, and some might just be completely turned off. So I always felt that I wanted to still have an echo from what went before, and I wasn't trying to, revolutionize the business. I was trying to draw really good, fun, solid stories that had some dynamic action and had good acting in them and this sort of thing, and just do a solid job. So so with Jay's work, I kind of just went ahead and made it my own. And that's another thing too, is if you're trying to follow another artist's work, or even if you're trying to ape them, you're trying to be a clone of this artist or that, then the problem is you have that artist's work next to you all the time, and you draw anything and you're constantly checking. Does this look like a Buscema hand? Does that look like Neil Adams? Does it really? Does it look like Barry Windsor Smith? I'm drawing something. Does it look like Kaluta? Who does it look like? Does this look like Jim Lee? Or does it look like Joe Mad? Whoever you pick that you want to draw like, you're constantly checking, and then it slows you down a lot. So I would say influences come from what you read and what you look at, and that just kind of they're kind of in your repository, your mental repository, and you just got to draw pure, just what images hit you and just do that, and your influences from who you learned to draw from, they'll just kind of come out naturally, and often depends on just the pose, the character, whatever, an influence that might be sometimes this is a Kirby panel, boom, right in your face, something that's much more, a lyrical type of thing. So it's something else, so, you might go, oh, this is a P. Craig Russell type of drawing. So it could be anything, So it's there. Yeah. So the long-winded way to answer your question is you got to do your own thing. But contrary to what John Buscema said back when I was 18, I said, well, what's the best way really to get into doing comics? And what did John say? Pick your favorite artist and swipe his style. That's drilled into my head, from like how long ago? 44 years ago.
Well, it's just funny.
The older I got, the more I realized he's right.
Because you are my favorite Doctor Strange artist, and I just thought that your take on it was so original, and I really loved what you did with it. And something you mentioned before about his look, when you're doing sort of action panels, and he has the flowing robes, and he has this and that. How did you, I guess, research making everything fit for those action scenes to make sure that everything flowed the way it should?
Well, it's interesting how when you mention that what everybody should realize is what you see on the printed page is like that proverbial tip of the iceberg. And 90% of the work is all the prep work. It's figuring out the flow of the story and camera angles and lighting and what the characters really should look like and all of this. And I know my version of Doctor Strange kind of, sometimes it's a little this, a little bit of that. But ultimately, it's something that you kind of have to get in, and it goes into the whole storytelling process of doing a lot of it, and just getting a good feel for the flow of a scene. And it really happens when you can, you've got your story and you can just sit down and say page one. And it's funny, I often had a problem with that first splash page, because it's got to be something, it's a big splash. You've got to get people's attention fast. I always found that to be a bit tough to get started. But once I get into page two and get into the continuity, that would go better. And I would sit down and I'd rough out the story in 2 days, just basic panel to panel, and figure the whole thing out. And you got to get into that mind space and just do that. And so you don't worry about always how something looks, in terms of lightness or whatever. You can deal with that later. You're just trying to get the flow of the story. So to answer your question that way, in terms of the design and everything, it just came from doing that all the time and just having a few things in mind. One is making sure that the readers get a good view of the characters often. So sometimes you might have something like this. It's like that's a picture of an arm. So like make sure you see his face, and or you see something, so you see the logo. These are the kind of things that would matter to me to make sure the comic looked more inviting. Some artists completely throw that out the window and they go in other directions, and that can work also. But just in terms of that kind of basic feel, it made a difference. Also, the acting was very important, and that's something Larry Hama pointed out a lot when he gave me my first, like the first ever real storytelling lesson I had working with him. Was that, we said, you are the actor. You're not drawing Spider-Man swinging through the air. You are Spider-Man swinging through the air. How does that feel? And the feet going up. It's like, well, you could go in a swimming pool and you can be Spider-Man, and because you can float, you can do all this stuff. We can't do that. In the air, I can't. I'm not that flexible. But in a pool, you can do all the things and you can feel like it. And Doctor Strange, you can, and it's like you can frame your face well. Because I use myself for Doctor Strange, I have to say. In fact, I do that with most characters. Any character, it could be a 10-year-old boy or an 85-year-old woman. It's still me. And if I need reference, I'll do me, and then I'll just fix the face. But Doctor Strange was usually me,
Mhm.
changed to him, with hair. And me with hair and a mustache. So there was a bit of Clark Gable, I would think sometimes.
Mhm.
It was interesting how Ditko saw him as Vincent Price originally. That was
Okay.
interesting because I didn't know that till recently.
Mhm.
But I saw like a Clark Gable type face at the time, and otherwise it was kind of me.
It's just so funny that you did that because that's that's cover of number 50 of Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
Yeah, but with the foil around it, of course.
yeah. Well, that's the thing too, and then you might be able to insert that one, but that was
Mhm.
one where it's like, oh, Geoff, we're going to do a hollow foil stamp on your cover, and you're like, oh, great. Well, I better design it for you, okay? Because it's going to be this. Oh, well, make sure it makes sense. It's going to
Mhm.
be his spell. So I still have that cover. I
Mhm.
sold a lot of the artwork, but that one, I still have it. In fact, it
Mhm.
technically belongs to my wife Amanda.
Mhm.
She said, make sure you just give it to me because people keep asking to buy it all the time. And I say, no, no, it's not for sale. Besides, it's probably worth like 50 times more to us than it is to anybody who wants to help, who'd want to buy it. So that one's off limits.
Totally. Let's jump back to Conan.
Unless Elon Musk shows up, Conan. Okay,
Yeah.
Conan, let's jump to Conan. Let's go to our favorite barbarian.
So what was it about Conan that drew you in that you said I have to write I have to draw
Uh,
this book?
okay, something about Conan. I saw him more as a real person somehow
Mhm.
than a lot of superheroes. Even though drawing superheroes is great fun, any chance I get to go back and do it, it's always great fun. There's that there's that interest, but Conan being again, he's a character where you see his own face, and Doctor Strange and Namor are also like that. Iron Man, like they say, people ask who's your favorite character and all this, and I say I like them all, but Iron Man isn't so much fun because it's just mask. So why in the movies they put Downey's face inside the mask because otherwise it's just a helmet. And Gene Colan was able to give him expressions, which is pretty cool. But nevertheless, these people, Conan, it's like the world he exists in. The characters are, more like flesh and blood, real people. They're not, and even if they're sorcerers and there are all kinds of different kind of demons and monsters, there's something about that to my mind that just felt more tangible. And I just like drawing that world. Cityscapes and stuff is like, it's pretty straightforward. You can get photo reference and copy it, and bang, you're done. But Conan's world, you've got, you know, demon temples, and you've got all this other kind of stuff, and the costuming and all that is just there's something about that world which I just enjoy. Yeah, it's really the fantasy world. So you can go really push it more to Lord of the Rings type stuff or Game of Thrones. Maybe Game of Thrones is more along that line, but again, Conan also the fact that there's something also interesting in that characters we do are not what you'd call fully rounded people. They're what you call archetypes. So they're your characters built around personality traits and behavior patterns. I mean, the Hulk is probably the prime example. The Hulk is just pure rage, and everybody feels that sometimes. Something that you just get so mad, you just want to smash, right? To me, that's what the Hulk should be about all the time. Now, when you all of a sudden, you make him well, he's the Hulk, but he's Bruce Banner, the scientist at the same time. To me, that kind of kills the idea. He should be just this rage, right? And every character has these personality traits that are there to be displayed. And when you have a variety of different these character types clash, that's where you get your conflict in your stories.
Mhm.
So to me, Conan is the guy who, he what he embodies is that really never say die attitude, and he'll go through anything and to get what he needs. But he hates sorcery. There's certain things that he really dislikes because he can't trust them, and he gets tricked by things like that. But in a fight, he's still going to he's still the best fighter there is there of that era. And also he does have his own moral code, it's like dealing with save the princess, and unless he's not just going to go off and have his way with anybody. It's like it's got to be consensual, at least. This kind of feel, right? So there's that kind of, which is not the way most characters would be operating in that time, and maybe even in our modern times. I don't know.
That's true.
But it's like the old west lawless land, and he's traveling all over the place, and so you get all these different types of scenarios or landscapes or civilizations and what type of thing. That whole feel of what the character's about just appealed to me.
Here's something about you and your art that really I find so, I guess, fascinating and interesting, is that you did Conan, you did, Doctor Strange, Submariner, action, but then you also did the Nom, some issues of that, which is almost the complete opposite. It's based on real life. You don't want to make it too over the top. You really want to sort of pay homage to what the story is about, just regular guys in this war.
Yeah.
Did you have to change your artistic mentality on that project, or did you go in with the same mentality to say, okay, let me just alter what I'm doing a bit?
Okay, well, that's a whole different approach in this sense, because first of all, when Golden's Fifth to the First came out in Savage Tales in black and white, and then the Nom, I thought it was terrific, and I even inked some of his pages on issue 8, I believe, and he was doing somewhat breakdowns, so there were a few things I didn't quite pick up on, and I inked I didn't embellish enough. I didn't kind of pick up on that at the time, unfortunately, but it was terrific. And then Larry says, how would you like to ink the Nom? And I'm going, over Golden, this is amazing. Like, I love his work. And he goes, no, it's not going to be Golden. We got this new guy. It's Wayne Van Sant. It's like, oh, okay. And he said, well, Wayne's storytelling is very good, and he's very good at all the equipment and mechanics, but his figure drawing isn't that great at this point. It's like, can you take his characters? Can you, bring them up? And so can you, work on those? So understanding that Golden did his take on reality for the equipment, but somewhat cartoony faces, which was a great play. That's kind of how he draws a lot of things. I really wanted to keep that feel. And as it turns out, Wayne's storytelling was very good. I worked on it for 2 years. And again, I simply got used to drawing everything pretty realistically. And this was another point that Larry made to me, was that a lot of veterans were reading this comic, Vietnam vets. And he says, if you draw something wrong, they figure you don't know what you're doing, and they'll drop the comic like a hot potato. They'll just forget it. So you have to be as accurate as you can manage in the time we have. So all that stuff, all the equipment, the vehicles, the helicopters, the combat boots, even everything, the laces and all this little business. I had to be really careful with that stuff. I think I learned from, Claudio Castellini had been doing some work for Marvel and for that office. And I had seen some of his originals. Now, you're familiar with Claudio? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I got to meet him a number of years ago at a convention in Spain. But anyway, Larry said he's using these micron pens, these new things, these Sigma, Pigma micron pens. They were just kind of new at the time. And he said he was just very slow and deliberate. And even when he was inking, instead of just doing flicks for feathering, he would draw each one and fill them in, manually. He says, you got to get some of this detail, use some of those, try that. So I started using those too. But yeah, it was somewhat laborious, but nevertheless, I understood that working with, Doug Murray as writer, this was what you call true to life. And a lot of these things happen very much for real. would be real people as opposed to fictional characters in the story. But I mean, this is real stuff. And Doug was dealing with how the North Vietnamese side, with war protesters, with everything, right? He was trying to bring a rounded picture, the whole rounded picture in. And um, and so yeah, there was a whole different feel to that, where I was really trying very hard to be accurate, and I'm still drawing. It still has to be me drawing, but um, the funny part about that is, if you're thinking stylist, I'm still not really sure what my style is. I can see the drawing and know I've drawn it, but I look at other artists and I know I can say, well, I can tell this is a Buscema drawing because, he did the cheekbone like this, or I can tell a lot of artists. But when I look at mine, I'm going, I don't even know what's my style. It's hard to say.
I want to jump ahead a bit to teaching, which is something you do as well. Why was that so important for you to have that as a part of your life, to get to education?
Well, from a family of educators as well. My father, he was a Marine. He did Marine ROTC, and then when he finished that, he went into teaching, became a school principal, wound up and got his doctorate at Rutgers, and then took a job. He had a few job offers, or he put out applications and had 3 offers, and one was in Montreal. That's why we moved up here. So when I was 10, we moved up to Montreal, and he taught at McGill University for 25 years there. So and my mother was a reading specialist teacher. Her mother would taught high school. When my aunt in Long Island that I went to stay at her house, she was also a high school teacher for a long time. There's educators all over in the family, and so I always found it kind of just an interest in, if I had information or I'd learned information, I'd be certainly happy to pass it on to anybody. And so from the drawing teaching I've done is, so much of the stuff I've just passed on information I've gotten from other people. But yeah, it has been an interest, and it's also was a nice steady job to have. So I taught here in Ottawa. I'm up in Ottawa in Ontario, for anybody who's curious. At Algonquin College. It's a college run by the province. They have 24. It's not really a community college, but it's definitely, or a tech school. It's part that. It's part tech. It's definitely career based. So I was recruited. I met the coordinator of this program called Illustration and Concept Art 8 years ago, and he offered me a position. He said, we've got a new program starting here. Would you like to teach? And I said, yeah. I taught in Montreal at a place called Syn Studio. That's SYN Studio. And that was, it was not accredited. It was just, a couple of courses here and there. So I had been doing that. And so we moved over here, and this all of a sudden, this is real academia. So I said, oh, I got course plans. Now I have to plan what to teach, and I have to do marking. It's like, oh my God. But it was part-time, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was very good. This past year in the fall and then the winter, we lost one of our professors. So I was asked to co-teach a second course. And then all along I've been working on other stuff, and like splitting it 50-50. But this fall and winter, the teaching was just taking a lot more time, and I was falling further behind. And so ultimately, I have people waiting over a year for commissions and things, which I said, I'm talking to Amanda, to my wife, and saying, first, like, what am I going to do here? I've also been working on a graphic novel. That's just something I should bring up at this point. It's called Toby's War, and it's now, yesterday, I completed inking it. I mean, I've drawn the whole thing. It's going to be, it's being colored by Lovern Kinzierski, and the writer and creator of the whole thing is Keith Davidson, also here in Ottawa. And so He's not really known in comics much. He's just done a couple things, but nevertheless, I've been working with him, and it's been taking like over 4 years to do, because splitting time, and I would get a film job and I'd get other things, and I have to leave it for a couple of months and come back. But this past year was like, this thing's got to get finished. So I've been really, I put off commissions for about 9 months, but things were just getting backed up. So we discussed it and said, look, you've got a lot of work. Maybe you should just call it quits on the teaching now and retire from that, because you got too much other drawing work to do. And I said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So that's what I have done. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, in that time, I'm glad that I was able to introduce to a lot of young artists, a lot of people from comics that, so many have passed away, unfortunately, but they didn't know Kirby and Wally Wood, and they didn't know, all kinds of people, Buscema and Frazetta. They hadn't seen Frazetta. They'd never seen Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein book. I mean, when I bring this to school and show them, it's like, well, sir, how do we do inking? I said, well, here's some of the best inking you're ever going to see. And their jaws would drop. Like, how does anybody do this? And I said, yeah, this is where I come from. These are the people I grew up looking at and poring over their work, and that's the direction I've been going in. And today's crowd that's really, so much anime, manga type stuff, which is fine. It's like, to me, it doesn't really matter. That's another thing too. I find that a lot of people, manga's no good. They should be doing this type of drawing and that. I said, I don't care if it's, if it's Frazetta, if it's Wrightson. I don't care if it's manga stuff. I don't care if it's SpongeBob. Doesn't matter. It's comics. It's cartoons. It's all good. It really doesn't matter. Just find what you love doing and get really good at it. So, the more time goes by, more I kind of realize that's what it is, because drawing in general is not easy. I've been telling the students, like, a lot of jobs and probably stuff you're doing for part-time work, most anybody can do it. A bit of training, you get to it. So this kind of world, it's different. In our world where like everything is supposed to be normalized and everybody's the same, this kind of work is elite level work, and there's no way around it. And I learned it mostly. I told them, yes, I got work at. I learned a lot at university and college about drawing, but I learned much more in a short period of time at Marvel about comics. Why? Marvel publishes comics. That's their business. They need people who can do the work regularly, really well, and on time, right? They need that. So they're not doing us a favor by hiring us. They need people to do the work, and do it really well. So that's one, for example, and worked with Larry Hama, who taught me a lot about storytelling. That's the kind of information I could pass on to them, and it comes down to skills that anybody needs for illustrating anything. I've since moved in the end of the 90s. I moved into a lot of film work. I've worked on over 100 different productions over the years, and the same concept ideas, the same storytelling skills, all that stuff, it applies across the board. It doesn't matter what role you're doing. It could be storyboards, could be concept work, prop design, set decoration. It doesn't matter. The same ideas of picture making, that skill set you need, it's there. So it's something I've been able to focus on for 8 years in teaching, was to let them all know, like, if you really want to get into this world, first of all, don't, and you said, were comics something did it turn out to be what you expected? Well, I didn't quite realize how cyclical the business really is, but I was very lucky to be in Montreal, where their film industry is a going concern, and I was able to kind of go sideways into that world as well. But versatility is huge. You have to have basic drawing skills, and you have to be able to expect to take them anywhere. And if you're going to be professional, you have to realize that you're not always drawing what you want to draw. But if for your client, but you got to get yourself interested in whatever it is you're drawing. Because if you don't have interest and you're not liking what you're drawing, who else is going to like it? Now, you better like what you got to make yourself like it. So that way you start looking at all drawings as series of shapes and designs and all this kind of thing, and color patterns and all that kind of thing. You start seeing it as just picture making in general. Mm-hmm. So that way you can make it interesting for yourself to work on just any kind of project. Now, that said, if I get asked to go back into superheroes, it's like, riding a bicycle, just fall right back into it, because that is where my original main impetus was. And I love the whole thing. So I just love it.
Well, you mentioned I want to get you on the show again because I want to talk all about the storyboarding and stuff like that. But for the time being, you just mentioned the project that you're working on now. Any other projects coming out, and where can fans follow you and find out what you have going on?
Okay, so primarily I have my Facebook is what I've been using. I have a Twitter or X account. Don't really use it. I kind of avoided it. Facebook is what I go to, and I'm not even on social media as much because I have so much drawing to do. But I have a fans of Geof Isherwood page where I talk. That's for anybody can look in and see what's going on, upcoming conventions. I'm not sure when you're putting this together, but I have like to air. But this year I just have our local show in Ottawa in September, and I will be at the New York Comic Con in October this year. So that's a big one. For next year, I don't know yet. I have to see, because I have an agent, Renee Witterstatter. She books probably like half the shows I go to. She sets up for me. These would be shows mostly in the U.S. or occasionally abroad. A lot of promoters, know me locally or this sort of thing, so they contact me. But she's the one. If anybody's wants me at a convention somewhere, she's the person to reach out to. And I'm also going to be starting up very soon. Maybe you can get it started next week. I'm going to be doing a live drawing session on Twitch. So that's going to be midweek, because if I am going to conventions, I want to pick time during the week when I'm home, So it's probably like a Wednesday night, and I'll be doing that on a regular basis. I've just about got that set up to go. So that way I'll just be drawing whatever I happen to be drawing. I did Facebook Live for a couple of years during COVID, and that went quite well, because I would do a drawing, and maybe the second week I would finish it and auction it off during the show, and have back and forth with collectors and fans at the comment section, and talk about just about anything, kind of like how we're doing tonight. Have a question, how do you do this or that? So it's a situation where, especially after teaching, I got much more comfortable with talking to anybody and broaching any kind of subject in terms of drawing and all that. And the biggest thing I found with that was teaching a lot of younger artists who I know and who had not spent nearly as much time as I had learning over the years. I had to figure out how to break down the drawing process, to simplify it, even simplify figure drawing, anatomy, things like that, in ways that not, you can watch YouTube videos, this, that, and the other kind of things like this. But I found that what I tried to do is find, and students would come back and tell me, says, you've got to, the way you teach us how to do figure drawing, and they've even taken other classes with life models, and you show us something different. It's a different way to approach it. It's something that's, and so I think a lot of it has to do with just trying to make sure the characters look alive, adding the gesture, the dynamic feel. Even in class, models are used to posing, 2-hour poses, and they sit there, and I'm asking them to do stuff like this. It was like it took a bit of time for them to figure out what I was getting at. Because the classes were not fine arts classes, right? They are illustration classes, which is more about storytelling and acting and doing stuff. So it was a whole different approach to figure drawing. And so that I was able to analyze quite a bit. and pass on. So it's pretty much the way I think and the way I try to get stuff across in drawing. It's like the idea of, it can be in a comic panel, it might be this, but in a panel, you'll see me get hand gestures in there all the time. I don't like drawing hands. Yeah, but you got to draw hands. But how do you draw hands? It's right in front of your face. Draw that, put your finger and go, draw around each finger if you have to. Acting,
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's that, as Bob Layton said one time, superhero comics is like opera. It's the grand gesture. It's the big, the big makeup, because people way in the back have to be able to pick up on it. And he says that kind of color and excitement is what people love about superhero comics, and why I wish the Marvel movies and DC movies, the costumes would be a bit brighter. Much of it so often is so dark and subdued. And I'm going, that's not what comics are. Of course, I have a good friend, Ron Sutton. He lives near us. He drew Elvira comics for quite a while, and he's doing the Carson of Venus on the Edgar Rice Burroughs site now. And he says he's not always a big fan of the superhero movies. And he says it's lacking the one thing I love about comics in general. And what would you think that is?
Color.
The artwork.
The
drawing itself.
Mm-hmm.
The art. That's what, ultimately, I think that's what all of us who draw, that's what sucked us in. Seeing how just the ink drawings, how they came across, and how we related to them, and how they they resonate with us. There's something about that. I got to do it. It's just like, you listen to certain music. It's like, I got to play guitar like, Jimmy Page or something. I got to learn this, right? Or Stevie Ray Vaughan, I got to play blues like that guy, right? So, you hear it and you say, I want to do that. And that's the thing about the drawing in comics, is what pulled us all in. So the idea of movies takes it in a whole other direction, which is fine. It's really a different medium, and it's an adaptation of the idea of comics. But if what you love about comics is the artwork itself, you're not going to get that in the movies.
Right.
So it's still why I think what we're doing is still going to be a viable medium for a long time to come, because there's that connection, you get with your readers.
And we are back. Yeah, Geoff, he's done so many different things. Artist in comic books, storyboard artist, so many different other careers he's been part of with his art. Really, really an interesting guy. I'd love to have him back. I enjoyed hearing the behind the scenes of how some of these projects got put together. So, Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you guys so much for watching, listening. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. We really want to get this thing growing, and we need your help to do it. So, have a wonderful day, and thanks again.